What's up, welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Nuremberg, the new historical drama film from James Vanderbilt, starring Rami, Malek, and Russell Crowe. This, of course, is the latest in a long line of World War II drama films. World War II continues to be a very reliable source of entertainment for people. It's just a thing that remains of strong interest. There's still plenty of stories to tell on the big screen in that regard. Maybe if academia and scholarship is finding less new things to learn and say on the film front, there's still plenty of angles to tell, such as something new around the Nuremberg trials at the end of World War II. Of course, the Nuremberg trials have been famously adapted several times. You had Judgment at Nuremberg in 1961 with Spencer Tracy. The 2000 miniseries Nuremberg featured Brian Cox playing none other than Hermann Goering, which of course is Russell Crowe's character in this new film here. And this film comes from James Vanderbilt, not exactly the most celebrated director, primarily a writer in his past, best known for working on Zodiac, also The Amazing Spider-Man, and Independence Day Resurgence. Nonetheless, here we are. The cast is pretty stacked up and down. After Malek and Crowe, you have Leo Woodall, John Slattery, Michael Shannon, Ren Schmidt, Colin Hanks, Richard E. Grant. There's a lot of characters, and that actually is a bit of a problem with the movie. Nuremberg is a very capable historical drama film about the end of World War II. However, it's completely unremarkable in terms of its filmmaking, its staging, its screenplay. Nothing really pops about the storytelling, and I think the dialogue in the film leaves a lot to be desired in certain moments. The best thing about Nuremberg is the chemistry between Russell Crowe and Rami Malek. I think Russell Crowe does a pretty good job portraying Hermann Goering, the highest ranking Nazi to actually be tried at Nuremberg. While his German accent is pretty broad, the charisma works. Rami Malek also well cast as a psychiatrist character. The dynamic between those two works well. Everything else, though, it's pretty rote. That being said, it's serviceable. It can be crowd-pleasing. I think it broadly is successful in its storytelling. It's just a lot less sophisticated than you'd want an historical drama film released in awards season to be. And I think the central premise of what the story is really getting to, Rami Malek's character, Douglas Kelly, psychiatrist, tasked with evaluating the mental fitness of the high-ranking, Nazi officers that have been captured and will be tried with Nuremberg. I think that's a really good premise. It's compelling and probably a story that a lot of people don't know. I think, Nuremberg, people probably know the cliff notes. People know how stuff like that went. Other, war trials, right? Like Adolf Eichmann in Israel, The Banality of Evil quote years later. Obviously, the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal happening concurrently. People know about these things, but any of the specific details, I think, are a little less clear. I think people might know the fate of Hermann Goering, but like how we got to that point, not exactly the most common story. So I really like how all that went, and we get introduced to some other Nazis as well within the cohort, but really the film is concerned about Kelly's relationship with Goering, so therefore Malek and Russell Crowe sharing scenes together in his cell. And while I like that framing, and I generally like how those scenes progress, everything else is kind of what the issue is. Broadly, the film does not look the best. It looks flat, it looks stodgy. It's not visually interesting. I would not call this like Darkest Hour, the Churchill movie with Gary Oldman. It's nothing like that at all, which makes that even more confusing because there's a brief moments in this movie where you get these kind of like Technicolor like throwback moments where we get introduced to Rudolf Hess's backstory. We get introduced to some of the other Nazi backstories, and it's like these weird saturated like newsreel type things. The movie kind of bounces around in tone a little bit because of that. In addition, there's a lot of characters in this movie, frankly too many. I mean, Ren Schmidt, big fan of her on For All Mankind on Apple TV Plus, has absolutely nothing to do in this. Richard E. Grant gets one key scene as the UK prosecutor, the junior to Michael Shannon, who's the lead prosecutor from the USA. Shannon acquits himself well. Unsurprisingly, we know how great he is at just orating. Perfect fit for the courtroom drama stuff that fills the second half of the movie. Colin Hanks as this second doctor, like second psychiatrist brought in after faith begins to wane in Kelly's abilities to get the job done. Very little to do as well. John Slattery just kind of going through the motions as kind of the general or head officer on the U.S. side of things, managing everything going on in Nuremberg. And then I think most disappointingly is all the stuff happening between Kelly and Goering's family, his wife and daughter. It's kind of rough, right? And I think what the movie needs to do is communicate Kelly's, findings in talking with these men that he later, publishes into, a book after the war. Specifically, his findings that they come across as normal people, no real different than me or you, which ends up being in direct contrast to a lot of other, takeaways about, what evil is and what causes evil. And I think a lot of that psychological thinking and where just public sentiment was in the immediate aftermath of the war. The movie suggests that I would have liked more stuff around that in the film. They kind of get to whether the trials will even happen, whether we're just going to go straight to executing these bad people, right? They share Eisenhower's POV, even though he's not actually in the movie. The movie, kind of nods at that on the early scenes with Michael Shannon, but we don't spend a ton of time dwelling on that either. I would have liked some of that stuff and maybe a little bit less of a focus on Kelly. I'm not really sure. Again, I think Malek is good in the Kelly role. Another character I forgot that's just completely a plot device is the young female reporter that meets Kelly when they both are coming to Nuremberg. You kind of see that one coming a mile away, doing Felicity Jones impersonation, I guess you could say. Overall, though, I think the courtroom stuff is compelling. Most of the time, even B-level courtroom drama stuff is still pretty dramatic, right? Is this as compelling as Anatomy of a Fall? No, but I think it works pretty good when you have Michael Shannon playing off Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe's able to play the cocky Goering that we're being told about. We were told that he's going to eat everyone alive and he's ready for this trial. He's being told that, and he does sell that pretty well. It does kind of come across as an abrupt turn when Goering gets exposed in the trial for maintaining his loyalty to the deceased, Hitler and Fuhrer and whatnot. Despite being a long movie, about 2.5 hours in runtime, it manages to really rush what happens to Kelly. I mean, we get some text on the screen, we get a brief reference to it, but the sad end of what befalls him post-war and the fate of his book and how society received him and his general takeaways about what lessons should be learned about the rise and fall of the Nazi regime, that gets incredibly short shrift in this film. I know the film's called Nuremberg, but it's supposed to be the lasting message and takeaway of this story, of telling the Kelly story, right? And it just doesn't quite get all the way there. So it kind of feels like a movie that's nodding at a lot of different things, but never fully committing to anything in an impactful enough way. Like I said, there's a lot of threads being tugged on: the greater society, Kelly Goering dynamic, outside things like what happens to Goering's family, the other Nazi people on trial that don't have too much to do in the film because the film's not really about them. But I'm still quite happy I watched it because I think it's still a pretty compelling film, and I think the story itself is pulpy enough, based on the real history, of course, that it's still pretty entertaining. I think when you get to the courtroom drama stuff and you see the evidence that was put on display by the prosecution, which was the I believe it's the very first newsreel documentary style footage of what was found at the various concentration camps across Europe, something that of course was not public knowledge at that time in the immediate aftermath of the war. That is a sequence in the movie where you basically just watch that film and it does not shy away from anything, and that unsurprisingly is very powerful imagery, very, very impactful. Leo Woodall character, I think he's able to kind of save himself because he also gets one really big, meaningful scene. He's kind of in the background of many scenes throughout the movie, but he gets that one big scene, which I think you kind of see coming. There's nothing too surprising about his character and where it goes, and a lot of the character progression in general. Nothing too shocking, but I think he does a really nice job, and he's a pretty compelling young talent still. Ever since he broke out on a White Lotus season 2, he's continuing to become popping up in more and more stuff, so happy to see him. Rami Malek, this was a pretty good year for him. I liked him in The Amateur. He was, I think, a great lead in that movie. And Crowe, obviously Russell Crowe no longer has the gladiator physique in his older age, certainly a portlier man these days. And some of his recent work, like what was it, the Pope's Execution, or whatever that horror movie was, Craven the Hunter as the dad, he hasn't been doing anything too great lately. This is definitely some of his best work in recent memory, and again, I think he did a pretty solid job. As Goering, certainly his dynamics with Malek worked well. So overall, Nuremberg, it's a soft recommend for me. It's not a transcendent, historical drama, war drama film, but certainly gets the job done in the end. Let me know, what'd you think of Nuremberg? What'd you like most about the movie? And for more movie reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.